Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is Saturday morning, June 20th, and I thought I would head out and talk to you about games a bit. Well, I have two general pieces for the episode. First is just a conversation about gaming life lately, and then the second is a more traditional shooting from the hip segment. So to start, it's been a bit difficult lately to talk about gaming much on the podcast, in part because my gaming life has slowed down a lot. I'm still playing a fair number of games, but pretty much only with my family. I'm not sure why I'm not feeling super motivated to play a lot of synchronous online games. When the quarantine first started, I was doing a fair amount of Tabletop Simulator, and I really enjoyed it. I just wasn't making the effort. So I may need to kick myself in the butt and just actively seek those games out a little bit more. But I haven't been doing that, so that part of my gaming life has slowed down a bit. As a result, I'm just not playing very many games with other people, other than family. I am playing a lot of asynchronous games, though, and that's been really a joy. Several of you member of the listening community for Pick Up and Deliver have been playing games with me, and I've been really enjoying those. While many of the games have been great, one that stands out recently that I enjoyed, I had a really great game of Agricola with Kevin Berendt, who listens to Blue Peg, Pink Peg. He and I have been playing Agricola pretty steadily online for months now. We just play one game and we finish and we start another. It's been really interesting, and I love the nuance of the cards that come from that game. So if you haven't had a chance to play Agricola much, I think playing online is great because you get plenty of time to think. You don't feel bad for making the other person wait while you ponder. It's great. But one of the main things that's happened in the last couple months is that my daughter has shown a significant decrease in her interest in games. Up until until the quarantine, my daughter has always been pretty gung-ho about games. She's usually pretty willing to play anything I suggest, and whenever we offer a game, she wants to play. However, we've seen a significant slowdown in her interest in gaming. Part of it might overlap with her interest in playing games with her brother. I'm not sure what comes from that interchange, but often when we want to play a game as a family, she doesn't want to play. To the point that we're starting to think, I shouldn't even, basically just ask once. And if she doesn't want to, definitely don't try to prod her into it or any kind of additional exertion to get her to play, because then she plays and it's just not very fun to play with, which is worse than not playing. So that's been kind of sad because I've really enjoyed gaming with my daughter a lot, and now that my son is showing a little more interest in it, having games where the four of us play together would really be fun. And having her then not be fun for those or not want to do them is disappointing. But teens are teens, and she is 14, so she's certainly feeling her legs and deciding what is a good fit for her. And so I'm sure she'll oscillate in and out of gameplay interest, as we all do in interests with our parents. So just be patient and kind, and hopefully she'll come back to it more later. So that's the kind of the gaming experience update. On the positive side, I did this week finish building new Arkham Horror decks for my wife and I. So we're going to start a new campaign of Arkham Horror the next time we have an opportunity to do something like that. So that'll be super fun. I can't wait for that. Okay, so on to the main content of the episode. Today, we are doing Shootin' from the Hip Double Shot. I only have two new games to talk about today, but I'm going to talk about them in a little more depth because there's only two of them and I have a longer episode to go. And both of these are authentic Shootin' from the Hip reviews because I've played each one time. So the games are getting the minimum of reflection, or the minimum of playtime before I reflect on them. So do take everything I say here with a big grain of salt, because I haven't even had a chance to play these a second time. This is a a single play reaction. So for my birthday, I got a fair amount of money, and I also got some birthday gifts. So one of my friends gave me a copy of Whistle Stop to play, and with some of my birthday money, I went and bought Forgotten Waters, the new Plaid Hat pirate game. So let's start with Whistle Stop. Whistle Stop from Bezier Games is designed by Scott Caputo, the designer of Voluspa, or for my Blue Peg, Pink Peg co-listeners out there, Voluspa, which is a really interesting tile-laying game that is basically an abstract. I mean, it's got a kind of pasted-on theme of the Norse mythology, but that, it's minimal. So Whistle Stop is about the expansion of train lines from the East Coast to the West Coast during the 1800s. The theme is pretty light. You're building a network and you're trying to accumulate resources and get points. It's train themed, but like I said, very lightly. The way the game works, you have these coal tokens, and you can use the coal to move your trains. You start the game with 5 or 6 trains, or 4, I think, depending on if it's a 4 or 5 player game. I think you start with 4. But so you're spending coal tokens to move your trains, and then you have these whistles, which allow you to move the trains either forward or backward and allow you to jump over other players. This is really important because for most of the spaces on the board, only one train can occupy them. Meaning, if you don't jump over another player, you might get your train boxed in, or you might be blocked from moving forward. So you get one whistle at the beginning of the game and a couple coal tokens, and then so a big part of the early game is figuring out how are you going to get more coal. There's a trading post thing that allows you to change resources into coal, and there's a coal yard that just gives you coal. And so thinking about how are you going to generate more coal. You get 2 every round, but that's not enough to really fire your engine. On your turn, you can do a number of things. You spend coal to do anything you do, and you're going to do things like move your trains forward. Then you also can buy these upgrades, and the upgrades then make your whole system more efficient. When you move your train forward, you're going to place one of the tiles that you have, sort of Carcassonne style, and attach it to the network of train tracks that are emerging on the board, and you keep moving your train forward until it comes to a stop. So the big way that you score points, there are these cities that when you get to the city, if you can deliver the goods that the city wants, then you get points for that. If you get your train to the end of the board, the left side of the board, then you get points for getting your train there, assuming you have the resources for that city. And then you also get a bonus of extra resources in. So there's a balance to be made of going slowly and building up resources and accomplishing things as you're crossing the board, and getting your train at the end of the board where you can get these big points, and you get the bonus resources that sort of fire your engine to continue. The other part of the game, and the part that I think makes the game probably more cutthroat than my family will continue to enjoy, but we got to wait and see on that, are the shares. So like a lot of train games, this game has 6 train companies, and they have these shares. The way that you get shares in a company is to deliver goods to a town attached to that company. So there might be a company called, B&O Railroad. I don't think that's one of them. And some of the towns in the game will have the B&O Railroad flag on them. If you deliver goods to that town, not only do you get the points for that town, but then you get 1 stock of the railroad. At the end of the game, whoever has the most stock for each railroad gets 15 points. Whoever has the second most gets nothing. So it's an all or nothing situation with the stocks. Also, if you're the first person to get a stock for a particular city, then you only need to have, then if there's a tie, you win, because the stocks come numbered 1 through 6. And if you get the first one of the city, then in the case of a tie for most, you would win. So these stocks could be game deciding. In our game, they weren't. I was already ahead enough that we all had kind of even. I think everybody got one or two of the stock certificates, and I was ahead far enough that didn't change the outcome of the game. If I had gotten 0, I still would have won. But I think in a more competitive game, it certainly would change the landscape. And if you have a couple people fighting over one of the train lines, you certainly could get into the kind of thing where 2 people fighting means the third person wins. So that's a caution to think about. The other thing that I think makes the game pretty interesting is the upgrades that you can buy. Remember, I said you buy these upgrades for your system. There are only number of players plus 2 resources, or of these upgrades. So in our case, in a 3-player game, there's 5 of them. Each of them is relatively powerful, and when you get it, it provides a benefit that you get to use as many times as you want. Although the benefit costs something. Like, for instance, you might pay 1 coal to get 2 resources or something. When you buy that initial upgrade by paying resources, and then the follow-up, if you wanted to buy an upgrade that someone else already had, is you still pay the 2 resources you would have paid to buy it fresh. And then you have to pay them 1 rare resource, which are slightly harder to get. Now the trick is, then they lose that upgrade. So the upgrades are not, more than one person can't have an upgrade. Only one person can have it at a time. And you're constantly having to take them away from each other in order to use them. Now, taking them away is pretty expensive. Those rare things are hard to get. So it's not something you're going to do a ton. Or if you did, again, in a 3-player game, that 3rd player would really benefit. But it is an interesting element where it creates player interaction in a game that often wouldn't have it. Reminded me a little bit of Radis that way, where you have these powers that you take from each other constantly throughout the game. The art and design and components on the game are all beautiful. I really like the style. If you just showed me this game and said, does this remind you of work done by anybody? I would say it looks like an Ian O'Toole game. It isn't one, as far as I can tell. I looked. It is not an Ian O'Toole game, but it looks like one. So overall, Whistle Stop, pretty enjoyable. I'm not sure about its long-term viability in our collection. Ultimately, it might be too mean, but I think it'll stay around for a while, if nothing else because it was a gift and I want to play it a few times. But it's pretty fun. Again, I'd have to see if it stays around long enough to become a game that we would get an expansion for. But there is one, which supposedly is pretty cool too. So that's Whistle Stop from Bezier Games by Scott Caputo. All right, the other game that I wanted to shoot from the hip about today is Forgotten Waters. Forgotten Waters is the new story-heavy pirate game from Plaid Hat Games, designed by Isaac Vega and a couple other people. I can't remember the names of the other designers off the top of my head. And with all of the flash and pizzazz of a Plaid Hat game. I was initially hesitant about this game until I kept hearing very good reviews about its quality of story and its level of entertainment, which I figured would fit really well for a family game, particularly a game my son might enjoy. So I'll give you a quick summary of how it works and then let you know what I think of after our first play. So Forgotten Waters is a pirate-themed adventure game that's not a campaign. It's scenario-focused, but each scenario you play a new character. So you're really playing just over 1 or 2 sessions. The game probably takes 3 to 3.5 hours if you play both halves of a scenario in one go, but it's designed to have a stopping point at about halfway where you can, quote-unquote, save the game and come back another time, which is what we did. So I've played half of one scenario. It must be played with an app, so that is an element. Although it's funny, they call it an app, it's a website. So I find that amusing. But yeah, it's a website that you visit, and you can download it so you can play it without being web connected, which is good. But if you want to have the full experience of the audio files that the app comes with or that they use, then you need to be live on the web. Like I said, it's a pirate game. It is a co-op, so the players are a team of pirates on an adventure following the scenario. The components, you have your own player sheet, you have your ship log, which is another sheet, and then you have a board that has a bunch of hex tiles. It's the map with a little standee for your ship. And you have an adventure book, which has a bunch of thematic imagery, and then the actions that occur at different locations. So the way the game is played, you, as a crew, you start in a location, And everybody, so at the beginning, everybody gets a character. You name it, you get a sort of plot that your character is pursuing. Each player gets a distinct plot sheet that gives them a story goal, and it is developed through a kind of Mad Lib system where you get to fill in some information. It makes the story a little personal. You also have these sort of objectives that are made mechanical by means of a constellation drawn on the front of your player sheet. And as your character grows in skills, you fill in the dots on this constellation with the goal of reaching at least 4 achievements by the end of the game to be counted a winner, or 5 achievements to be counted an epic winner, or 3 achievements or fewer and you did not win, or sort of. You can also lose the whole game as a team if your ship ever runs out of hull or your crew mutinies, which are mechanisms that happen based on the choices you make. There certainly is some luck involved. You often are rolling to resolve things, but there are a fair number of elements that you can use to mitigate that randomness. And it's more satisfying as a system than the Jerry Hawthorne storybook games like Stuffed Fables or Comanauts, which I found not very satisfying. So that said, as a game, it is pretty light. It is a very light story-based adventure, more than anything approaching strategy. So the way that you play is each round, when you're at a location, there are a series of objectives or a series of actions that you can take. The game has a sort of regularly changing turn order called the infamy track. So the least infamous or the most infamous player goes first because you're pirates. And when you go, you put your character standee on one of the action locations. And then you and the other players all work together to resolve those actions in the order of the sheet. So you might be the first one to pick, but you might not necessarily be the first one to play. And generally, when you're resolving the actions, you gain a skill, check that skill, and then some sort of story event happens based on how you checked. So there's a lot of rolling and then reading stuff. The interactive app here comes with a thing where you can punch in a number and it will read the story element to you instead of making you read it out loud. And that works really well. It's very good voice acting, really involved and entertaining. So overall, our first play was pretty fun. I enjoyed the story elements. I like the way that your character's story shapes the way that your skills are set up. I had a lot of fun with my family listening to the story elements and exploring those. And I think it will have a productive and fun run as a game we can play for a while. Although it might end up being my wife, my son, and I more than my daughter as well. As a downside, it's not much of a game. It is a storytelling engine with a little bit of game element tossed on the top. I mean, it helps. The game element helps provide you some motivation for making the choices that you make. But ultimately, it's about exploring the story and having fun seeing what happens to the characters and to the ship, regardless of sort of choices or motivation. So from that regard, if that sounds fun to you, if the exploring a fun story with a little bit of light game theme sounds like a good time, I would say Forgotten Waters, based on my first play, is probably something up your alley. But in terms of being a game, there's not a whole lot here. I'm excited to try the rest because I want to see how the story goes, and certainly it was fun to explore with my family. Well, that's about it for me. I've actually walked a circle around the tree in my front yard a couple times, so I think it's time to wrap up. I hope that you have a pleasant weekend, and pop over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 to let me know what you think of Whistle Stop or Forgotten Waters, or whatever games you've been playing lately. I look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you can join me next time. Until then, I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.